All right, today is June 22nd, 2020, and we're here today with Josh Winegarner. He's candidate for Congress for District 13 in Texas. Josh, welcome.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate you having me.
Why are you running for Congress?
Well, I think that we need to make sure that we have somebody that understands our issues, the uniqueness of the 13th District, representing us in Washington. Washington's dysfunctional. We see that time and time again. They come out with these one-size-fits-all policies, these regulations that are meant to address something in New York or Chicago or LA, but they do it in such a way that it hurts us. We need to make sure we have a voice so that those things can't continue to happen.
So what does a congressman actually do?
Well, in my mind, a congressman is, and I like to use the term representative, because that's what the job is. And that person is supposed to represent the district they come from, the people in that district, the economies of that district. And then they need to be an advocate for that district. So it's not just about taking votes, talking about policies. It's also about being that person that if there's something going on in that district, and it may be something like a neighbor down the street hasn't received her Social Security check in 3 months. You have a voice in Washington, an advocate that can go help that woman make sure that she gets her checks. Fixing those problems that we know that the government creates. And that's what a congressperson, a representative, is supposed to do.
So it's kind of the voters' liaison to the federal government.
Well, yeah, I mean, more than just a liaison, it's an employee of the voters.
Okay. So what do you intend to do?
Excuse me.
So what do you intend to do for the voters of District 13 once you get elected?
Well, I think that's goes back to that previous answer. You're an advocate for the voters in this district, not just the voters, but all people that live in this district. You're an advocate for the businesses in this district. You're representing them on policy issues and regulatory issues. We've got unique needs in this district, different than areas throughout the country. So focusing on the difference between rural healthcare and Dallas and their healthcare system. Focusing on agriculture issues, oil and gas issues, small business issues that are different here than they are in the rest of the country. And then again, just being that person that's there to listen. I think one of the reasons that Washington is so dysfunctional is that the people that have been elected to serve have forgotten what their job really is. They don't listen to the people. They don't understand their districts and continue to be a part of those districts and be that voice, be that vote for the people that elected them.
So tell us about you and where you grew up, your family, your story.
Sure. So I grew up in Spearman. My mom was the school nurse there for 30 years. My dad was a John Deere salesman. I grew up, riding my bike all over town just like every other kid in the Texas Panhandle. And then as I got older, I was a volunteer EMT there in Spearman. I was, and I think my dad did this on purpose so that I made sure I had a summer job. But I was a hired hand for several people on their farms, their ranches. I was a night janitor at the hospital and the nursing home. I was a physical therapy technician there at the hospital and nursing home. So I've done a lot, just like a lot of people that grow up in a small town. We've got a lot of different jobs that we do throughout the school year and in the summers. I even worked for the county one summer patching potholes with hot mix, which if anybody's thinking about not going to college, go do that job.
Yeah.
And it'll show you why higher education is a good thing. Now we've got to have people that and I say that, and I'm not joking about the seriousness of that work. What I'm saying is that it's hard work, and I learned how to do hard work when I was young, and I've carried that through to everything that I do. So when I left Spearman, I went down to Abilene for college. Was there for 4 years, graduated from McMurray University, and then went across town to Hardin-Simmons, and figured out that I didn't need a PhD, I needed a JOB, and that's when I decided that I started looking around for what can I do, and had this opportunity to go to Washington and work for Phil Graham. And I started at the very bottom, answering telephones, and worked my way up in that office. And then when he retired, Senator Cornyn hired me, and I started out building his office and then moved into a policy role, and I worked on agriculture, small business, and trade issues for the senator. And then in 2006, Texas cattle feeders came to me and said, "We've got an opening in our office here in Amarillo. Would you like to come home?" And I said, "Absolutely." I'd just gotten engaged. We were ready to start a family, and we moved back here and have been here since 2014, living in Randall County. We've got 2 kids, 7 and 10. They both go to the Canyon schools, and my wife is on the Canyon School Board. She sells farm and ranch real estate, and we're active in our community. We go to Hillside Church there in Canyon. We started out going to the Amarillo campus, and then when we moved to south of Canyon, we started going there in town.
Very good. So you ended up at the Texas cattle feeders. So what does the Texas cattle feeders do?
So we represent, well, we're a trade association, with our membership being the feed yards, the farmers, the ranchers, and the small business owners that are all part of the cattle industry.
So who does the Texas cattle feeders represent? The producers and the feeders?
Yeah, producers, feeders, feed yard owners, people that feed cattle in the feed yards. We've got affiliate membership with people that, you know, small businesses that may have trucking companies or something else like that.
And so you work for them trying to represent the issues of those people,
Correct.
their special interest against other special interest in DC?
Well, making sure that I mean, again, we're different. We're the largest cattle feeding region in the world, right here within 150 miles of Amarillo. So we've got different things, different needs, different issues that we have to address that most people don't see. And when you are dealing with a policy issue, take the tax bill, for example, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was a great bill, but had some provisions in it initially that were detrimental to car dealers, feed yard owners, other people with a large inventory. Well, we had to go in and explain, okay, this is why this is different. This is why we're different. This is what is the implications of what's going to be in this bill are going to have this effect on our industry, just to make people aware. What I do mostly is educate people on the cattle feeding industry and how the policies coming out of Washington and Austin impact our membership and our economy overall.
So what are some of the issues that you're working on right now with the Texas cattle feeders?
So again, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was one that was big. We worked on trade issues. We've worked on, you name it. We don't just, it's not just agriculture, because there are a number of things that impact us just like any other small business. So labor issues, taxes, they're all things that I've had a hand in playing. But when I started running for office, I changed my position. I didn't think it would be good for me to continue to do what I had been doing. So I transitioned into the role of Director of Industry Affairs. So now what I do is keep the feed yards up to date on information with regard to what's happening in Congress, in Austin, making sure our members know what's going on from the regulatory and the policy side. But then also talking about, hearing what they are concerned about, and then making sure that I'm representing our industry wherever I need to be as a person to speak on behalf of us.
Interesting. So what do you think are some of the, just give me a few of the biggest issues that you think we're facing here in the 13th?
Sure. I think one of the biggest issues right now and not just in the 13th, I think this is across the country, is we've got to control our borders. We've got to finish building the wall. We've got to keep the drug traffickers out, the human traffickers out, and then we've got to completely rework our immigration system. We've got too many people that came over here legally on a visa program, overstayed that visa, and now we don't know who they are, we don't know where they are, or what they're doing. We've got to have strong borders, and like I've said several times, our national security starts with our border security. And I think that we see that every time I talk to a sheriff's department, every time I talk with people in agriculture and other businesses, this is something that comes up all the time. So making sure that we have a strong immigration policy that really protects our country. Our immigration program should be to benefit the nation and our economy. It shouldn't be a drag on our economy. So that's one. The other thing a couple other things that I see that we really need to be looking at is our rural development. Making sure that we get our fair share of the federal tax dollars that we pay into the government back. Per capita, I would say that we probably drive farther than anyone else in the country, which means we pay more in federal gas tax than anyone else in the country. But we don't see that returned through investment in our district. Most of the federal gas tax that we pay in, and just in general, Texas is a donor state. So we pay more in from the state level than other states, and then we get back. So what Texas gets back then gets divvied up even more, and most of it stays on the other side of I-35. So we need to make sure that we have a voice up there, somebody that can really tackle this issue and make sure that what we're paying in is coming back for us, for this district. And that would be, our roads and bridges, but it would also be water infrastructure. We obviously have significant water needs in the Panhandle. So we need to be thinking, okay, what can we do for additional conservation? What can we be doing to try to capture more water through runoff? One of the things that I want to really explore, we've got reservoirs that are great, but new reservoirs, the permitting process takes years. There are private property right concerns that come up with that. But one of the things that we need to examine is we've got new technology for desalination, which is something that we need to be using more of because we still have a brackish aquifer below the Ogallala that we can utilize. And then we need to be looking at where we've drawn down the Ogallala significantly. What can we do about aquifer storage and recovery? Meaning that when we do have our flood events here, that water goes into something that we can capture it and prevent evaporation. That's one of the biggest concerns with our reservoirs, is that we capture that water coming down the river, but then a significant amount of it evaporates.
90 inches a year.
Yeah. So having some other opportunities, using other technologies and means to capture that water is going to be significant for the continuation of our economy throughout this district.
Could you just introduce a bill and get it passed to make it rain?
I don't think that God necessarily follows the whim of Congress.
Okay. Well, a lot of people think the government can solve all problems, so my thought is just pass a bill to have it rain an inch a week in the Panhandle and we'd be good.
I think what we need to be praying for is that Congress follows God, not the other way around, and then we would be in a lot better shape.
Points well taken. On your back to kind of what you do with the cattle feeders, you mentioned on your website that one of your things you're going to do is to fight against special interests. What do you mean by that?
Well, we've got groups out there like PETA, like the Humane Society of the U.S., these environmental activist groups that come in and try to tell us that what we're doing is wrong, that for some reason they think they know more about raising cattle, as you do, than you and I do. They think they know better about what's good for our oil and gas industry than we do. They're activist groups that their only mission is to destroy our economy here. That's why we saw the Green New Deal, for example. That was AOC and her squad of socialists putting out a policy that would have been terrible for our country and really terrible for our district. When our economy is largely based in oil and gas, agriculture, and the small businesses that support much of that, then of course it's going to be horrible for us. And that's the kind of activism, those far left activists that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I've been fighting them for years, ever since I was in Senator Cornyn's office, on policies that they would put out and making sure that we were pushing back with the facts on how they were going to be detrimental to Texas, detrimental to this district, and detrimental to our country.
So you don't think we'll be able to pull our 30-foot cattle trailers with a Prius?
No, I don't think that the Prius will haul them.
All right. Tom Roller asked me to ask you a question about you've been accused of working against Trump on the USMCA by a local PAC. What is your response?
It's absolutely not true. I think this is a clear indication of somebody that doesn't understand policy, nor do they understand the policy process. What we had was NAFTA that was very beneficial for our district, especially from the agriculture and oil and gas side. And it was being changed and we all supported that change. It was 25 years old, I think. It needed to be updated. But what we were saying was that let's not throw it out until we have that replacement. Let's keep working on building up the new, better NAFTA, which was NAFTA 2.0. It was still called NAFTA up until the time that the president renamed it the USMCA.
So you didn't work against Trump?
No, absolutely not.
Another thing, what's your position on COOL?
Sure.
Country of origin labeling?
So I am a staunch proponent of a voluntary country of origin labeling system. I think it's going to be beneficial to our producers in this area because what it will provide is an opportunity for a premium, an opportunity to showcase our product. What happened during the Obama administration was a government mandate that was pushed down upon all of us that was so complicated, so convoluted, and had so many holes in it that it did none of that. What it did was add expense throughout the chain. So, and all of the paperwork requirement got passed down to everybody else. And in that process, you had to prove that your cattle were born, raised, and processed here. You didn't have to prove that, even though you knew that they were not from Mexico or Canada or somewhere else, you had to prove up that I certify with this affidavit that these cattle are U.S. only cattle. So that paperwork got pushed up the chain and down the chain, and all these requirements just kept adding more and more cost to the system. Packers had to segregate product, the feed yards had to segregate cattle, and then make sure that they got shipped on a certain day to a certain packer. It just created a mess.
Bureaucracy.
Yeah, more bureaucracy. It's a prime example of what happens when the government mandates a program and doesn't understand the industry they're trying to address. The other thing that it did was it exempted all of the food service, all of the institutional product. So anything that went into restaurants, schools, hospitals, they were all exempt. And anything that was further processed. So anytime you had even a steak and say fajita, pre-seasoned fajita meat, that wouldn't have to be labeled at all. That's not the way it should be. We should label this product because we're proud of it. And it's the best product in the world, but we need to be able to capture value from it, not incur costs because of a government program.
Now, you mentioned voluntary,
Right.
so you don't think it should be mandatory that any meat coming into the United States should be labeled as foreign meat?
Well, that's slightly different there. So any meat that comes into the United States is labeled under I think it's the J Treaty. Whatever package it comes in, it's labeled as a product of such and such country. We don't import a whole lot of muscle cuts. It's pretty rare. What we import is lean fine trimmings or lean trimmings that's ground with our domestic product to make the hamburger meat that goes to food service and other places. And the reason that that's done is because we've transitioned our culture into, we don't see a whole lot of 80-20 anymore. It's now 90-10 or 97-3. So we don't produce a lot of that lean trimming. So what we would have to do otherwise would be to take, say, the chuck, for example, and instead of packaging that as a roast, we would have to grind it. Now, ground product, is less valuable than that roast. Mm-hmm. So to do that, we would then devalue the price of that calf that I'm going to buy from you, because I'm going to use more of that muscle meat for a grind than I am for a roast or a primal.
Yeah, but what is it about? The last I checked, it was like 4.3 billion pounds of beef is imported into the U.S. every year, about 20%.
That sounds pretty high to me. I was thinking it's more like 11%. I'd have to go back and look, but it's, again, and of that product, it is that lean, fine, those fine trimmings, or those lean trimmings rather, that's imported. Like I said, there's very little muscle cut because we just don't eat that type of beef normally in the U.S.
So basically, we don't have enough to stretch the meat.
Right. If we had more cull cows, we had, then we could utilize that product instead. But our cows are lasting longer. People are, we're producing more beef today than we did with less cattle than we did in the 1970s and for sure the 1950s. So we're producing much more with fewer animals.
Do you know what percentage of our beef is exported?
I don't have that firm number on that, but the export market is significant for us. Our main export markets would be Mexico, Canada, Japan is our top market, both in volume and value, and then South Korea. The other thing that we do is we export a number of products that we don't consume in the United States. Tongues, tripe, short rib. Number of those products are what we're exporting, and we're getting even more value from those because here they're just not as consumable. They would be similar to offal, and then we would get less value for the animal that way. About $325 a head is what is the breakdown for foreign products. So I said foreign product, I should have said the value of exports. So each one of the animals that you have, about $325 of that, its value is in export.
And you're talking about a fat steer. Okay. Yeah, the last I checked, we produce about 25 billion pounds of beef in the U.S. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I want to go back and check that. I'm not certain on that number, but it's probably in that ballpark.
And what I read is we import we consume about 25 billion and we import roughly 4.5 billion. And I guess the question is, do we need to produce more beef or are we producing too much?
Well, I don't think we're producing too much, and I don't think that again, I'm going back to that. The beef we produce is a different quality beef than anywhere else in the country. Yeah. It's a grain-fed, highly marbled, really flavorful, and tender beef. It's sought after, obviously, in the United States, but all around the world. What other countries produce is a leaner beef. and we use some of that lean beef, and these are all from countries that are FDA inspected. They have equivalency with our food safety standards, and those lean trimmings are what we use just to make ground product. Again, we have very little imports of any kind of primal. I mean, you're not going to go to the grocery store and see, except maybe in rare circumstances, a steak from another country, because that steak is just not going to look like the steak that you or I would want to buy.
Right. Yeah, grass-fed stuff's not as pretty,
Right.
but doesn't have the marbling. All right, on to another subject. You know, one of the big things people are talking about is 5G.
Hey, can we stop right there and go back real quick to that?
Sure.
So one of the other things that because you mentioned grass-fed, I mean, that is a great product, and we need to also capture all the value we can out of our grass-fed beef. So making sure that there are markets for that product for the consumers that want it. They may want that grass-fed steak, so let's make sure that we have that market for them rather than taking all that product and grinding it up just for our hamburger to make that blend we need for that 97.3 or 90.10. The other thing that I've really been pushing is that we have an opportunity because of a provision in the 2008 Farm Bill that will allow us, whether it's grain-fed at the ranch or at the feed yard, or whether it's grass-fed, to sell our products through interstate and international and locally. So there was a provision in that bill that would allow for any state-inspected plant, beef packing house. So we're talking about here Eads or Clinton Sons or Keeters, smaller facilities, what you and I would probably call a locker plant, to, if they wanted to, package and sell that product across state lines and internationally. That is allowable because the state of Texas has an equivalent food safety system with USDA, with the Food Safety Inspection Service. All we have to do is get those two to agree to the terms. They've got the equivalent standards, and then that frees up opportunities for local producers to sell their product and get more value out of it. One of the things that is really interesting to me is that a number of our retail establishments here, United, for example, you can't sell product unless it's got a FDA, unless it's got a USDA inspection on it, because of their own liability. They're not real keen on state inspected product. But if we do this program, then they could do that. They could sell that product locally. So you or I could go, we could go down and buy Dan Rogers beef in the meat case. That provides you an opportunity now to sell locally to people that know who you are and think, well, yeah, I know Dan, I'm going to go buy his product. So it gives a great opportunity to do something like that. But it also could allow us to say, okay, we're going to set up a co-op. Dan and I and 4 of the other people that we know that are producing cattle are going to come in together. We're going to set up a co-op, and we're going to sell panhandle beef around the world. Maybe a very small amount at the beginning, but now we've got a label with Texas flag, the U.S. flag, Texas Panhandle on it, and that'd be a game changer for us in my mind. Now, small quantities, we'll have to baby step it, but
Well, what it does is it starts to unravel the problem of the packers controlling the market.
Right.
A lot of people think that you have 4 main packers.
Right.
They basically, it's a monopoly, really.
There are definitely some challenges with that, and that's why I've called on the USDA, DOJ, CFTC to be investigating what's going on in our beef market today, what's going on with the packers, what's going on at the CME, making sure that we know all the information, and then we need to make some decisions on moving forward.
Yeah, because when you get too big of groups like that owning the slaughterhouses, the feeders don't have any pricing power because they can't keep the animals.
Right.
So they have to take what they're given, and the packers know their costs, so they're just going to pay them enough to barely keep them alive, which trickles down to the producer.
Yep. And that's so having these smaller opportunities would be great, but that
Yeah,
also
no,
then
that's a
creates a
great idea.
business model for the mid-size packers, the Cavanesses, the South Texas beef that used to be cane beef. You know, we've got some smaller operators, but if they had the opportunity to, for the really small ones to expand, to grow.
I'd rather have a whole lot of small ones than a few big ones.
Yeah. And then the other thing that will help through, not just on all of these things we've been talking about in the beef sector, but for all of our businesses, whether it be, you know, our small businesses on Main Street, whether it's our manufacturing facilities, it's reduction of the government's regulatory burden that I really think is stifling our economic development. It is, you know, if we want to talk about stimulus, that is the best stimulus we can do for our country, is to remove all the burdensome and unnecessary regulations that have been thrown on us. It makes it hard for people to start a business. It makes it hard for people to expand their business. And that's, you know, in our culture, you know, we live in an area where we are, entrepreneurship is in our blood, taking a risk is in our blood, and now we've got government regulations that stifle that, that say, well, just because you want to do this, you can't, because you don't meet all these check marks in Dodd-Frank, therefore we're not going to give you a loan. You know, and before Dodd-Frank, you know, you've probably known your banker all your life, and they would have said, well, yeah, you're good for it. We know you're gonna work your tail off and try to pay us back, and if you don't, then according to this loan, it's my risk to take. And now we don't give people that option anymore. We've handcuffed the lenders. We've made it hard for people to get out there and try, and that's not our country. That's not our culture. I mean, we've got to change that mindset.
I agree. All right, we started talking about 5G. What are your thoughts on that? A lot of people are concerned about it because it was originally developed as a crowd control device by the Israelis, and there's some rumor that they have the ability to make people sick with it.
I've seen a lot of that. It's something that I'm studying up on significantly. I do have some concerns. What I've been talking about more than that, though, is what can we do to really bring broadband into the 13th district? FCC, and I know 5G falls under this too, but FCC has this, it's just this strange map that as soon as one line gets run into one county, they call that county good.
Yeah, but they don't hook onto it.
Right, and that one line may be going to the hospital or it may be going to the school, but there's no hookups to go to the homes or to go to the businesses. And that's one of those things that if we can fix that, and that's a game changer for us, because then we create a scenario where maybe somebody that I went to high school with that decides, well, you know, I want to raise my family back in Hansford County, or maybe we want to live in Randall County, but my corporate office is in Houston. I can do that with broadband now. And now we've added a new family to these small communities. We've added new kids in the school. You know, we've added a new a spouse, new person in town, so they may be an electrician or a plumber, or you know, they may be an accountant. So you've created a scenario where you can really see expansion into our rural communities.
Well, I think what happened, I guess, and that was the Obama stimulus deal. They ran all this fiber, but you call up, because I've done it, I know where there's fiber right at the end of the road. I wanted to hook onto it to take it to a subdivision. They have no interest in using it.
Yeah.
I think they got paid a bunch of money to lay it, but they don't want to mess with dealing with it.
And then there are others that they do. I mean, that's, you know, conversations I've had with realtors on just like the subdivision you're talking about. One of the things we were looking at is, you know, we can make this cheaper anytime that we're laying lines for that subdivision, be it sewer or electrical or whatever, why aren't we laying fiber on top of it? And that way you don't have the expense of digging another trench. You know where their homes are going to be, and now you're set up for when people move in.
Yeah, fiber is not that expensive.
Right.
I think it costs about $10,000 a mile. The last I checked on the price, which in the large scheme of things is not that expensive.
Right.
Cheaper than electrical.
Yeah,
By far.
and lasts a lot longer
by
than
a factor of 10.
right, and it lasts a lot longer than copper.
Right.
So you've got, and you can move out those mechanisms as technology advances. You can plug in these new mirrors and the new things, the repeaters inside of it, and it allows for that. I mean, you don't have to change the fiber itself. You just have to plug in something that allows, okay, now that light goes even farther.
Yeah. And I know you can go overhead through the air, you know, up to several miles now. They've increased that capacity. So if you have a canyon or
Right.
something, they can shoot over and then go back in the ground. And it's done a lot more than we think.
Right.
We just plug our computer in and hope it works.
That's right.
But what do you think about this virus that's going around called COVID-19? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I've got a lot of thoughts on it. I mean, I can't believe that the Chinese lied to us. I mean, I shouldn't say I can't believe it, because we know the Chinese don't tell us the truth very
They
often.
lie to us all the time.
Yeah.
We're just used to it.
Exactly. But I mean, it was, you know, they kept information. They were hoarding their PPE. They shut down flights internally, but they let flights leave their country, spreading it around the world. I mean, we've got to hold the Chinese accountable for their actions and all of this. And then, you know, because of the little information that we did have about it, you know, I think that the president, our governor, our medical community made the decisions they did based largely on the fact that we were only dealing with that limited amount of information we had, and not what the Chinese and others already knew about it. So, yeah, it turned out to be, and you know, we still don't know what the ultimate ramifications of this are going to be. We don't know if it's going to come back stronger or not as strong later, but we do know the damage that the mitigation efforts have had on our economy, and that's something that we can't allow to happen again.
Do you think it was right for the government and the governors and the local elected officials to shut down the economy and lock people in their homes and shut down businesses?
Well, I think that what we should have done instead was, we need to have, like we do on a lot of other medical issues, those that are the most susceptible and those that are infected are the ones that we should be talking to the most about keeping them, you know, safe. Closing our economy, we can't let that happen again. I mean, we can't let that cure be worse than the disease itself. I mean, we've dug ourselves into a hole now that is going to take us years to dig out of.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm right or not. It's just speculation on my part, but I'm thinking maybe I think they listened to the scientists, and maybe they were told it was a bioweapon or thought it was a bioweapon, which scared our elected officials, and they kind of overreacted is a possibility. But once they do that, then they scare the population. And once the people are afraid, then you have a real problem.
Right.
And it's very difficult to undo that. And then the other problem is, once the elected officials taste that power that they have, or that they exercised, whether it was proper or not, that's hard to undo too, because they don't want to turn loose of it. It's psychological. I don't understand it, but you see it when you see it throughout history. You know, wherever somebody is able to have that much control over people's lives, they can't stop. And to me, could be the biggest problem.
Yeah. And I think that's another prime example of the difference between our area and other areas. We had so many essential workers based off of the types of jobs we do. we continue to have people out and about working because we had to continue to, our law enforcement had to be out there. We had to continue to produce food we had to continue to produce fuel. And then all of our healthcare workers and the sacrifices they made. I mean, it's just.
So who makes the determination of who's essential?
Well, I think.
That's
Yeah.
The hardware store owner is told he's not essential, but Walmart is.
Right.
What's the difference? I mean, I don't understand that.
I don't understand some of those same things either. It's that hardware store that's providing products to farmers and ranchers out there are as essential as anybody else in my mind.
But to me,
People.
everybody's essential.
Right.
And the business owners should make that decision, not the government, because it's stripping their property rights away from them. So basically, if we have a crisis, is it proper to suspend the Constitution?
Absolutely not.
What is this BLM business?
Okay. I don't mean to make light of it, but I want to make sure I understood your question. Are you talking about Black Lives Matter or the Bureau of Land Management?
That's a good question.
Black Lives Matter thing that's going on. I'm switching gears into the current events of Black Lives Matter.
Well, and I'll get to that, but the reason I asked that question is we do have an issue in this district with the Bureau of Land Management where they have
Go into that.
taken property along the Red River, tried to tell people that, that they've had deeds on this property for going back generations. They've been paying taxes on it for generations, and now they're saying that, well, you don't own that property. It's now federal property. And that's a significant issue that we're going to have to deal with because I am a strong proponent of private property rights. That's an illegal taking, and we need to get it fixed. It's been dragging on now for several years, and it's got people, they're in limbo because now their titles are now being questioned. But again, this is land that they've been paying taxes on, and they're still paying taxes on it, even in the time that it's in limbo. So, got to fix that one. Back to Black Lives Matter. I mean, from what I understand, it's a group that is concerned with issues going on throughout our country, and concerned with. I mean, I think their claims are police brutality, that it unfairly targets black men and women.
Do you think there's systemic racism in America?
I don't. I know that I'm not a racist. I know that the people that I surround myself with aren't. So I don't see it. I use the standard that's been instilled in me since I was a child, and that is that God commands us to love Him with all our heart, soul, and mind, and then love our neighbors, and that's how I view people.
So we don't seem to have a big issue with all that going on here in the Panhandle, like they do in some of these bigger cities, and so why do you think that is?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to guess that your dad told you the same thing growing up that my dad told me, and that is when you are told something by someone wearing a badge, that person, you show them respect. You listen to what they're telling you, and you do what they say.
That's right.
And I wonder if it's not some of that. It's just a difference in how we were raised. And how we were raised to view other people, to respect our elders, to respect law enforcement, and to respect everybody else.
Yeah, today they're not taught the way we were, but most of them grow up without a dad, and that's probably part of the problem. So how do you fix a problem? Well, you figure out what causes a problem,
Right.
fix that.
And I think that goes into something that's even more widespread, and that is, I always knew that if I got in trouble when I was a kid, at school or out in the community, I was going to get in even more trouble when I got home. And there was more parental oversight, I guess, to make sure that we were raised the way that our parents instilled in us. And I think that breakdown in the family dynamic is significant.
Yeah, I mean, that's the foundation of the country, really,
Right.
is the family. And once that disappears, I'm not so sure that's not some people's goal. They know that if they can destroy the family unit, however they can do it, then they can destroy the country and take it over. But, all right, on to another subject. What do you think about your opponent's plan to try to bring the pharmaceutical industry from China to Amarillo?
I think it's the idea of bringing manufacturing to the Texas Panhandle is a great idea, and it's something that a number of people have been talking about for years. Through the work that me and Texas cattle feeders and a number of community leaders have been doing to bring the Texas Tech Vet School here. You know, we've talked about, hey, look at all the opportunities that this brings if we have a pharmacy school, a medical school, a veterinary school, all right here on one campus. Plus, you've got the A&M component of a veterinary school at WT. You've got the other resources throughout the Panhandle from the healthcare community and the veterinary community. That creates a great opportunity for research, for development, and then for manufacturing. But I'll say that you've got to also address, we've got to address a couple of other things. We've got to make sure that we deal with the regulatory burden that I was talking about earlier. Make sure that we have created an environment where we're inviting to people that they would want to come here. I know from talking to economic development and chamber people across the district, they get calls from companies all the time that want to move to our area. But when they get here, they look and they say, well, costs are an issue, but then also your labor supply is an issue. You don't have enough people living in your community that can run this manufacturing facility or this new business that we want to start. So I think we also have to look at what can we do to help create that environment, reducing the regulatory burden. That includes our taxes, obviously. And then I've been talking about a type of grow your own program where it's more focus on career and technical education, starting as early as high school or maybe even junior high, so that we're training people that if you want to work in a certain industry, you've got the skill set to go out there and get started. You don't have to go to a four-year college if you don't want to. But continuing cooperation between our universities, our junior colleges, our high schools, and our junior highs, really getting those types of programs set up so that we're growing a population of people that are trained for a career and they're educated to where they can work in that career. And we do something like that at Texas Cattle Feeders. We've got a career and technical program that we work with area high schools. And when they graduate from high school, they've learned animal handling, they've learned heavy equipment operation, a number of other issues that prepare them to go in, and now they've got the opportunity, if they choose to go into the feed yard as an employee, to go into a dairy, maybe some other business that's related. If we did more of that, then we could grow that skilled trade population. It's also important for all of our rural communities. If we look at the age of a number of our plumbers and our electricians and others, we need to be building up those skilled trade positions anyway, because we need that support especially in those rural communities. So it's circling back to your original question, it's a number of things that we still have to address. Some of them are federal, some of them are state and local, but the need for a reduction in the regulatory burden and lowering of our taxes to be able to recruit people, to recruit businesses and people to live here and work in those businesses is also going to be vital to any opportunity to have more manufacturing in this district and in this country.
One of my voters or precinct chairs wanted me to ask you, in your commercials, you describe your opponent as Obama's doctor. Why does your commercial leave out that he was Bush's doctor and Trump's doctor?
I don't remember ever saying that he's just Obama's doctor in a commercial, especially one that I cut. I mean, I know that there was a commercial that talked about what some of the people that worked with him in the Obama administration said, but I don't know specifically what you're referring to.
Well, he indicated that there's a commercial where and I think I've heard it, maybe it came from a PAC or something, but where it describes him as Obama's doctor, but it doesn't mention that he was Bush and Trump's doctor.
Well, he obviously was, but I don't remember that.
Now, you indicate that you have a lot of support from the ag community, which you're really involved in, but yet the ag commissioner endorsed your opponent. What do you say about that?
I don't know why Commissioner Miller made that decision like he did. I haven't talked to him about it. He's obviously entitled to his opinion, and he doesn't have a lot of involvement in the livestock sector. There's the Animal Health Commission that really deals with the livestock sector and the cattle sector specifically. So I haven't interacted with him much. I have interacted with him, but I haven't had a specific conversation on why he thinks what he thinks on this issue.
So, this is a runoff election. You were the top vote getter. What was your percentage of the vote out of 15 people?
It was just under 40.
Yeah, like 38%, something like that.
38, 39, somewhere in there, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty impressive, right?
I think so.
So now you're in a runoff, and 13 of those other 15 people are gone. What percentage of the people that voted the first time do you think are going to vote in this runoff?
I think that's hard to tell. I mean, given what's happened during COVID and, has the media scared people to come out and vote? It's in July. I don't know that we've ever had an election in July before, so are people that have been cooped up in their homes all of a sudden, if they can, decide we're going on vacation, we're not even going to be in town? Is it front of mind? So I don't know how many people are going to go out and vote. I hope everyone does.
Are you doing anything to get the vote out? Are you making any plans to do anything to try to increase that vote?
Sure. We're block walking. We're calling people on the phone. We're sending out digital messages, trying everything we can to make sure that we get the word out that there's an election on July 14th and early voting starts June 29th.
Well, in Potter County, we're going to do what we can to let people know. I'll do the best I can to get the vote out and let them make a choice. Speaking of the voting, where do you stand on the Democrats' plan to institute mail-out or mail-in, however you want to look at it? Their plan is to mail everybody a ballot and then you mail it back. What's your stance on that?
I think that's a horrible idea. I mean, that would be fraught with fraud.
Well, in Texas now, if you're over 65, you can request a mail-in ballot.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, I support that. I think that's a good opportunity for people if they want to choose to vote by mail, if they're of a certain age. You know, they may be, if they have a disability, if they are over 65, if they're out of the district at the time of the election or the county at the time of the election, or if they're active duty military, then they can request a vote by mail. I think everybody's vote should count. It's important that all people have the opportunity to vote, but mailing out a ballot, again, these are requests for a ballot that we do currently under Texas law, but mailing a ballot to an address that you don't know exactly who lives at that address is, I mean, again, it would just be, you could see people driving down taking ballots out of mailboxes and filling them out and sending them back in, and nobody would ever even know that they were mailed one. It's too wide open for people to abuse, and it's just, it would really call into question our elections.
Yeah, it's scary. I don't understand the concept of, I mean, to me, voting is the most important thing we do as citizens. It's the great equalizer.
I agree.
Your vote counts the same as your opponent's vote. My vote is the same as Melania Trump's vote. Donald Trump's vote is the same as a widow woman and lives up here in North Amarillo on a fixed income. Everybody is equal in America when it comes to voting, yet so many people don't do it.
Right.
And it bugs me.
It bugs me too.
I mean, it just almost makes me mad. And that's really one of the reasons I took this job, to see if I can figure out a way to do something about that and get more people to the polls and get them educated and get them informed and make them aware of their power as citizens. I have an idea that I haven't proposed, but I may throw it, it may be in our county convention that we're going to have this weekend. It's going to be one of our resolutions to add to the platform. I don't think there should be any mail-in ballots, period, except military, where that's controlled. And there may be a better way there. But you're throwing a ballot into a third party that you have no control over. And that, to me, is scary. You don't know. The mail truck could have a wreck. There's so many things that could go wrong. And with mail-in ballots, you could have a foreign country print ballots and mail them out to people, and nobody would know that they weren't ours. It just, to me, it's illogical. Why you would trust the mail? If you want to get something, you're going to send it FedEx or UPS or But I think that a simple way to solve the problem, because you have the two-party system, and we used to do it when I was an election judge. Both election judges have to take the ballot box to the election administrator or county clerk's office and watch them count those ballots. Why wouldn't we do the same thing with people that cannot make it to the poll? I think most of them can. It should take a little bit of effort. I think that if somebody wants a mail or cannot make it to the poll, they should contact their election administrator. The election administrator should require them to have a signed, notarized affidavit requesting somebody come and help them vote, and then both parties, either the county chairs or the precinct chairs, or they can appoint someone, and both people have to go to that person's house and help them vote, and both people take that ballot back to the EA. If we did that, number one, you'd have extremely few ballots that are requested that way. I bet you wouldn't have 20 in Potter County. And then there's no question. And it would be simple. And you're not putting it into a third party's hands. You have both political parties have a representative. What do you think about that?
I'd want to look into exactly the details of it, but I guess my gut is that, I mean, just think about people in our hospital, though. They can't make it to the polls. And they should have the same ability to vote as anybody else.
So
So
they're not home to get their mail either.
well,
So
but
that we could go take the ballot to them.
well, if that's the case, then I mean, I like the concept of making sure that there's more integrity into the process.
Yeah.
Because I think that our voting is the most. I mean, it's the most important thing we do as Americans, in my mind, is making sure that we vote and making sure that the vote is secure, the integrity of our voting system. I'd be curious about the added cost of that to see how that would work. Because the last thing I think we also want to do is say, oh, that's too much hassle, I'm not
Well, that
going to
wouldn't
vote
cost
because of
anything.
it. Well, I mean, it's going to cost you more time, it's going to cost the
Yeah, but
election
that's why
judges.
we're here.
Well, I understand that, but is that going to be an unfunded mandate onto the counties now, that they would have to incur more cost?
Well, it would be we're all volunteers, we don't
Okay.
get paid. So, I mean, to me, election integrity is worth a little sacrifice.
And I agree with that too. But
But I mean, the parties would, if there was a
Right.
cost, the parties would fund their cost of doing it.
right. I'd like to look at it, your proposal, and see what it actually says. I mean, make sure that I can study it, but I want to make sure that our vote the integrity of our voting is secure, and that we have confidence in our vote. But I also don't want to create a situation where we're encouraging fewer people to vote. Trying to find a system.
Well, we want
that,
everybody to vote that's alive.
right, exactly. We don't want the people that aren't alive. We don't want the people that can't prove that they're a U.S. citizen to vote either.
Right. Yeah, they say that California, if there was no election fraud, would vote Republican. 112% of the population of Los Angeles is registered to vote.
Wow.
That's why I'm against mail-in ballots.
Right.
Yet you just have no control. The other thing I think we could consider, I think you ought to have a separate photo ID as a voter ID issued. You could be used as identification. Should have nothing to do with the Driver's License Bureau, and maybe it needs to have your state representative and your state senator's picture on it when you receive your ID, so you know who they are. Right? But then also, so they'd vote for my plan. But actually, it kind of makes good sense to do that because so many voters don't know who their representatives are. So it could list them on the card, have their photo on the card, and it would work as an ID, and you have to have that to vote. If you lose it, you either need to get it replaced, and it's all free, but you have to have it to vote, period. If you don't have it, you don't vote. That's another thing I think we need to do. We really need a separate ID. Driving, nowhere in the Constitution can I find anywhere where it says, in order to vote, you must be able to drive a motor vehicle. I don't see it. And that would be a simple solution that would solve a lot of problems. So, all right, so what happens if you win?
What happens if I win?
Yeah, what's the first item on your agenda?
Well, I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, the first thing we've really got to do is finish building this wall and securing our border. And then we've got to just really get into reforming our immigration system. And then I want to deal with all this regulatory burden, the unfunded mandates we have, the excessive costs of these regulations on our businesses that stifle economic activity. And I think coming out of COVID, one of the things that we can do that it would be the best stimulus that we could have is, and the president has also, I think, agrees with this because we've seen his actions through COVID by relaxing the regulatory burden. He's done an executive order sending his agencies and his departments, hey, you need to go look, and if there are regulations that you think are unnecessary, overly burdensome, send them back to us and let's look at them and we'll start cutting them. Helping in that process will be a significant stimulus to our overall economy because now we've freed up the ability of people to get out there and actually start or expand, or they may have decided to transition to something else. But that business development, making that opportunity or providing that opportunity for people to really do the job that they want to do is what's going to stimulate our economy more than anything else.
So as a freshman House member that's currently controlled by Democrats, how
Well,
are you?
hopefully it won't be by the time I get up there.
Well, we all hope that. We hoped that last time. But what if it is? How are you going to break through that? I'm trying to figure out a proper, polite term to use of that barrel of monkeys up there.
Right. Well, you don't always have to pass a bill on a specific issue to get something done. That's what the amendment process is for. And adding an amendment to another bill that has to pass that is specific to the 13th district, understanding that mechanism, understanding the process that's used to pass legislation, that provides even those out of power the ability to make sure that they can address concerns in their home districts. And looking at opportunities to put forward an amendment that's going to be beneficial for us is for sure what I'm going to be doing. And then we're going into the next farm bill, this next Congress. We'll start the work, laying the groundwork for that. So having a seat at that table, making sure that our voice in this part of Texas in the 13th district and our type of agriculture, because we're much different than the Midwest and the Northwest, that we have a voice on that. And with Mike Conaway retiring as the only Republican Texan and former chairman of that committee, making sure that we have another Republican to sit on that committee that's from this district and really understands agriculture is going to be hugely important for our district. And then, as I mentioned before, transportation and infrastructure, having a seat on that committee and being able to address the concerns we have from our own infrastructure needs. A lot of it's just about educating Congress in general about why we're unique, why we're so good at certain things, and what some of our unique needs are, and how we work to get what we need to help us be even better. And make sure that, and again, I go back to this, that we pay a lot of federal taxes that we don't see returned to this district, because we don't live in those high urban centers, the big population centers that seem to get all of the funding.
So what do you plan on doing if you don't win the runoff?
Well, I'm going to keep living here in Randall County, raising my kids, and I guess I'll be working with Texas Cattle Feeders Association if they'll keep me on, because I want to continue to be a part of this community and continue to serve this community in whatever capacity I can, because this is my home. It's been my home, and it's always going to be my home.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell the voters?
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity to be a candidate for this election, to put myself out there, get to know you, your concerns about that you've got with the federal government, get to know you as an individual and your businesses, and just making friends and understanding the dynamics throughout this district, the culture, and seeing the great things. This is one of the things that I've talked about on a number of occasions, but it instills in me why I love this district so much, and is that during the COVID shutdown, we were trying to figure out how can we be of help, and we didn't stop campaigning, but we kind of transitioned. We had volunteers that we wanted to utilize, and we created a neighbor-to-neighbor program on our website, so that if you needed something, here are some resources for you. If what you needed isn't on there, here are some volunteers that may be willing to help. And I had a call from a woman that said, I can't drive, we're low on food, can you send somebody to the food bank and get us, some groceries? And I called one of our volunteers and said, hey, this lady has asked if you can go grab some food for her. Can you do that? And it wasn't here in Amarillo, so I couldn't go do it myself at that point. And he said, no, but I'll go to the United and get her some. He didn't even want to go to the food bank. He just said, no, I'll use my money to go buy her some at United and take them to her. And I think that's just one of those, it's one of the reasons why I love the district so much, is that when we see a need, we take care of it. We don't wait for somebody else to do it for us. We address the need and we move on.
Well, at the end of the day, life's about people.
Exactly.
Everything's about people. And I think that's one thing people have forgotten, and that's a problem we have in these big cities. And it's even getting that way here. People don't know their neighbors.
Right.
And if you don't know your neighbor, and when you cram people up in these big cities, they just, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah. It is, and one other thing from that same time period I'd tell you about was, we were able to deliver some masks and gowns to the hospital districts and testing sites. But the other thing that I saw was the church that I belong to, along with some of the other people in agriculture, stepped up and have been doing these pop-up food pantries for people that were in need. And we're talking, milk, beef, cheese, eggs, potatoes, nutrient-dense, high-quality food, even some vegetables here lately, where we've been able to, I think they've given out collectively, and there have been places here in this district and also in Lubbock, but almost 420,000 pounds of food has been distributed throughout our community to help people in need. And that's just another one of those prime examples of how people see a need and they're willing to give, make a little sacrifice and help the people that they know need it.
It's hard to imagine that there's that many people needing food,
Yeah.
which concerns me, because what's going to happen when all this stimulus runs out?
I think we may also see that, because I've had this conversation with a number of small business owners and restaurant owners, that they would love to open back up even more than they are, but they're having trouble getting employees back because they're making more money with the extra $600 a week not working. And
Yeah, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of in my life.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Right.
It just destroys. It just destroys people's incentive to work and starts skewing the market in ways that nobody ever thought about.
Right.
And then they're ruined for life, the people that receive it.
Yep.
All right, Josh, well, I really appreciate you coming by today, and enjoyed it, and good luck on the campaign trail. And if I don't see you before, we'll probably see you on July 14th.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it, Dan. And I'll see you Saturday at the convention.
Oh, that's right.
So,
Yeah, okay, very good. We look forward to it.
well, thanks for having me
Appreciate
on.
you coming by.
Yep, thank you.